What's up, goobers? I know it's been a second, but let me tell you a story. I took a vacation out to the West Coast to go see family, and something really funny happened. I forgot my power cable for my laptop. So you're not reading the title wrong. This is how I spent time writing my script without having access to my computer. And if you stick around, I'm going to show you some writing tips that are applicable to any stage of writing. The first way to write without writing is to use the reminders app in your phone. Just put in your scenes that you know are going to happen in your movie. Maybe even if it's just 2 or 3 bullet point things, you can then move them around within the app and maybe get a different perspective on how the scene could play out if it comes after a different type of scene. You might find some different dynamics between characters doing this, and you might also find some interesting ways to transition between the scenes. Now, that's obviously like worst case scenario. You don't have your cord to your computer or anything, so you can't write. But what if you can write, but you don't know what to do? This is where I would go next. Typically in my writing process, I spend a lot of time just like doodling and throwing random stuff on a Google Doc. Different ideas, things that come to me, I just throw them in there. It's just a massive mess. And then from that, I go to an actual treatment or an outline, which is a beat by beat, like this happens and this happens and this happens. More or less the structure and the things that are happening in the story are set. And then from that, I go into a treatment phase, which is where I write a 5 to 7 page treatment. Yeah, it's almost more in prose, like the way that you write it kind of like a novel. There's no dialogue though. You're kind of focusing on character motivations and how they feel and stuff, and different key events that happen. You spend some time detailing, but only for 5 or 7 pages for the entire script. Then what I do is I take that treatment or the outline, depending on where I'm at. Treatments are a lot easier for people to read because it takes less time and they get the gist of the story. So when you're pitching something, treatments are really important. I've only pitched a few things at this point, so I've only done treatments for a few things at this point. Most of the time though, I take the outline, like the beat by beat thing, and I literally just copy that and I put that into my script writer. And I just start at the top of the story and I'm like, all right, so-and-so goes to the store. Okay, I write that scene. And then I go to the next one and I write that scene. And next one, write that scene. And eventually, by the time I get to the end of the story, I've probably got like 50 to 60 pages because of the amount of detail I've been able to add to that. But then also I've had a secondary Google Doc open that I'm jotting ideas down on. And these ideas come up during the initial draft process. And then what I do is literally just go back to the top and rewrite, and go back to the top and rewrite. Eventually I end up with a 100-page script because of that. The adding of detail on top of the bones of the story to me is a lot easier. That's why this technique is a little bit odd, and it's only worked for me one time so far. But with this particular project, I was having a really hard time fleshing out where things went, and I felt like a lot of the nuance of the story was going to exist in the dialogue and the relationship between the characters. So what I did was I took this one scene that I was like really sure about. I was like, it happens halfway through the first act. This is the heart of the movie. It's the relationship between these two guys. And I wrote that scene. And I kind of just treated that scene like my North Star. Like that was the thing that I was either going towards or going from. And so then after I had written that scene, I was like, well, what comes before that? And I wrote the scene before that. And I was like, well, what's the scene after the North Star scene? And I wrote that. And eventually the story started to pick up and some of the holes started to get filled in my brain of how to get from A to D, the B and C became really clear. So I'm not super religious on like trying to get into the script writing process as prepared as possible. Depending on the project, depending on how your writing process goes, maybe getting into script format is a little bit easier sooner before you have all the details figured out. Maybe it will help you discover the ideas and the details. I definitely find it's a little bit different also if you're writing for something for you to direct as opposed to try to write something for somebody else to direct. Whoa, all right, hello? Come here.
We need the nugget content.
Hey, Bubba's, yeah, look at the camera. Look at the camera, you're a star. Oh my God. Sometimes providing as much detail as possible in the descriptions of the scenes and whatnot is really important if then you're trying to hand it off to a director to go shoot and you want to make sure that the wholeness of your vision is communicated for them to interpret. But really, if you are writing something that you intend to direct, really what you need to do is just provide blocking instructions and dialogue cues to your actors. So an actor might be a little bit more forgiving of a slightly rougher script in terms of detail if they are having an opportunity to participate in the writing process of the character and the dialogue and the action and stuff like that. Some directors are very loose with their blocking instructions or their dialogue cues in the scripts that they provide their actors, communicating to the actor that, hey, you are going to help me create this. And that can sometimes elicit positive reactions or negative reactions from your actors. I think just use your best judgment when you're approaching those kind of situations. Really quick before we move on, if you can hit that subscribe button and click the bell, that would be amazing. And then I'll show up at your house with those like Christmas bell things and be like, ding, ding, ding. There was that movie where it was about the girl who was like in bell choir, but it was for like underprivileged students. I'm going to put a clip of it here, but I can't remember it for the life of me, but it exists in the milieu of my brain somewhere. And then finally, there's a part of writing that I think goes overlooked sometimes, and that is doing your character work, fleshing out who are these fictitious people that populate this world and speak these lines and do these things. You know, in the book Rhetoric, Aristotle wrote based on his experience watching Greek theater, not even Greek theater, he was watching people watch Greek theater and seeing how they responded to different aspects of story. And he basically breaks down the different aspects of the story and how much they appeal to people and how much he feels like they matter in the long run. Towards the bottom of the list that I think a lot of people don't necessarily realize is spectacle. The largeness of the explosions and the set pieces in New York blowing up eventually just kind of fades away as people watch them. They don't care as much as they care about the characters, which is the second most important part of Aristotle's rhetoric breakdown. Number one is plot. So it's like what happens, what's the structure of the story. The second one is who are these people? Who are these characters? So I've broken down characters and how they function into four basic food groups. I don't know why I call it food groups, but four basic groups. The first one is the want of the character. What is the thing that they are going after, or what is the achievement that they are pursuing? What is the goal of their life? What is the thing, the target? What is the thing that they're spending time, energy, and effort to go after? Now, this could be something as simple as getting the girl. This could be as something as complicated as saving the world. But ultimately, the want is an external thing that is being pursued by the character. Now, the second one is need. And basically, this is the internal want of the character. And this is usually the want behind the scenes, right? It's like they want to get the girl, but in reality, what they need is to be loved. It's the internal result of getting their want. Number three is habit or sickness. What is their flaw? What's the thing that's keeping them from pursuing their want and getting their need? It's the thing that they need, but not in a good way. It's the fuel for their problems, basically. And the fourth is cure, and that's why I chose sickness for habit, because the cure is basically the thing that will get them out of their rut and move them into the place of their want. And it's different from their need. Their need is fulfilled by the want, and their cure solves their sickness to get there. I'm writing a script right now, and this is the breakdown of my main character, Ray. Ray is a young man in his 20s who's working as a valet. His want is to get his ex-girlfriend back. His need is to do something significant with his life. His habit is lowering his standards to include Harrison, his friend. And his cure is being reminded that this is his life and no one else's. Now, these are less emotion-based structures for these characters. They are more action-oriented, which is what I feel lacks in a lot of characters these days. Their emotions are separate from their actions, when in reality, most people are influenced by their emotions to behave a certain way. And that's where characters start to feel a little more authentic. So Ray wants to get the girl, and this is, in the story, it's right after he's been dumped and he's kind of down on his luck. And he wants to pursue a new woman so that he can feel a sense of significance, right? That's his need. He needs to feel that he is doing something significant with his life because he just feels like he's slacking, He's 24, he's a valet, He's making good money, but he doesn't have a degree. He doesn't have value within the traditional structure of what he is used to as a person and in his culture. But he feels like if he can get the girl, then he will have significance in his life. And Ray's habit is he tends to self-sabotage or demote his own potential for the sake of including his friend Harrison. Now, Harrison is a whole nother kettle of fish. He's got a lot of problems, but I'll go over his chart in just a second. And then Ray's cure is ultimately realizing that this is his own life and he has to live it on his terms for nobody else but himself. And through that, he will find his own significance. What happens when the character realizes their cure is it frees them from their want because they identified their need and they are able to bypass their habit or break their habit or cure their sickness. So in the story, I'll save that. Sorry, that was like such a fake out. I'm writing the script, I'm still figuring it out. But Harrison is a little bit different. So Harrison is also in his mid-20s. He's childhood friends with Ray. He never really amounted to much. He's like a cool guy, but deep down he's kind of limited. Like he's kind of that guy who's gonna be a waiter in his 50s or something along those lines, and kind of holds Ray back in a lot of ways. Or Ray allows himself to be held back because he enjoys being friends with Harrison. And Harrison's want is to have fun with the boys. That's ultimately his priority in the whole movie, is to just goof off and get into as much mischief as possible. He needs to be comfortable. He doesn't feel like he's good enough because of his upbringing and his broken relationship with his father that he can amount to anything notable. So he's not gonna try. He's just gonna try to stay in a safe, comfortable place. And then his habit is to protect people so that they will stick around. Ultimately, this is a character that's found a lot of value inside of the world of the valets, and he has kind of latched onto that as his central identity. And we don't know his cure yet because he's not our main character. The cure typically does not go both ways. The cure is for the primary character. I don't foresee him being someone in the story who finds resolution. He is more the habit that Ray has to break. So Ray being cured ultimately kind of removes him from Harrison's life. To me, I like writing characters this way because they feel a little more real, but also it feels like they have more consequence in each other's life if they are directly related to each other's cure and sickness. And basically for them to grow and move on with their lives, they would have to separate. There's a really famous talk that the creators of South Park did. They do a talk and they talk about what I would call causality-based writing.
Each individual scene has to work as a kind of funny sketch. You don't want one scene that's just like, well, what was the point of that scene? We've found out this really simple rule that maybe you guys have all heard before, but it took us a long time to learn it. But we can take these beats, which are basically the beats of your outline, and if the words "and then" belong between those beats, you're f***ed, basically. You got something pretty boring. What should happen between every beat that you've written down is either the word therefore or but, right? So what I'm saying is that you come up with an idea and it's like, okay, this happens, right? And then this happens. No, it should be this happens and therefore this happens. But this happens, therefore this happens. And that, as soon as we are able to, and literally sometimes we'll write it out to make sure we're doing it. We'll have our beats and we'll say, okay, this happened, but then this happens, and that affects this, and that does to that, and that's why you get a show that feels like, okay, this to that, to this to that, but this, here's the complication, to that.
This type of writing is the key to making good story. The consequential nature of decisions by characters equaling decisions that other characters are forced to make, constantly coming to a fork in the road where they have to go one way or the other, makes the story compelling. And ultimately, that is Aristotle's primary means with which people find enjoyment in story is the plot. And the plot is causal in nature, and the plot is action-oriented in nature. That's why I like writing my characters this way. Hope you found some enjoyment in this. I'm really excited about writing this new feature film, and please comment questions down below. I love answering them. Thanks.